So the safeties group, and the reason I'm splitting these out here is because they play. I mean, safeties and corners obviously play different roles, but in Iowa State's defense specifically, they play very distinct roles. And specifically because Iowa State plays three safeties and two corners most of the time. Um, they can put extra corners on the field for a nickel or something like that. But for the most part, this is where you're going to see in the safeties, especially for Matt Campbell, safeties has always been a very significant point of strength for the defense. That's a place that they've always had good players, and I think they've got another group. Unfortunately, the big departures from this group, from the safeties group from last season, is obviously Bo Freeler and Malik Verdon. Bo Freeler played 4 consecutive seasons, never missed a game, I don't believe. Um, just the definition of an Ironman workhorse safety. Unfortunately, his body paid the price for it because he was just so banged up that like an NFL future just really he really just has there isn't an option really for him to go to the NFL because he's just sustained so many injuries and his shoulders have nothing left. Where the NFL might just not be an option for him because he truly laid it on the line for Iowa State for 4 years, and you know one of the great cyclones of all time. And if Iowa State retired jersey numbers in football, he would be on my list. I think there's a handful of guys that you'd maybe put ahead of him, but he would be very very far up that list. He is you could make the argument he's not necessarily a hometown kid, but he is to Iowa State football the last 4 years what Taman Lipsey currently is to the basketball program, where he's just a guy that goes out and battles and battles and battles. He's a good player, not perfect, but a great player that just lays it on the line for Iowa State. So it sucks losing a guy like Bo Freeler because he's such a great leader at the back end of that defense. But I would be shocked if he didn't end up as a grad assistant on the coaching staff at some point, um, on somebody's coaching staff. That guy will be coaching football at some level at some point. I don't know exactly what that looks like, but he'll be somewhere. Um, the other one is Malik Verdon, another guy that was really banged up for a lot of his career. That was kind of one of the only like I wouldn't even know if he'd say like a knock on him necessarily because it's not really his fault, but he did have some trouble staying healthy for a chunk of his career, and he actually could have come back for a year, but he wasn't so banged up that he can't have an NFL future. So he did not play in the bowl game, and he's not coming back. Obviously, he's declared for the NFL draft and went to the combine and the Senior Bowl and all that, and as well as the the Big 12 Pro Day that was a couple weeks ago or last week, I believe. So he'll be an NFL player, really talented guy, big time run, big hitter in the run game. Could be a little bit vulnerable in deep coverage at times, but not a bad safety to have back there. I mean, if it's just him on a receiver deep, and he's got a shot at it, I mean, you feel just fine with Malik Verdon back there. But really, I would his strongest point was absolutely in the run stopping game. And so you hate to lose two guys like that that's played a ton of football the last 3-4 years and started a ton of games. That losing that kind of experience in the back end is never ideal. But fortunately, Iowa State has done a very nice job of developing this position room over the years. Um, Main starters here that you're looking at, Jamison Patton right there at the top of the list. He's a guy he played a bunch as a true freshman, played a whole bunch last year, and I would be shocked if he is not a starter this coming season. If he's not, that's because someone has played really, really well and somehow jumped him. But Jamison Patton, he'll be a starter. The other about guaranteed starter here is going to be Jeremiah Cooper, who again has played. I think he's played basically every game. I don't know if he's missed any or not, but he's played essentially every single game since the beginning of his true freshman year. Um, he's a very good. At his best, he's a ball hawking safety that is capable of picking off a lot of passes. 2023, I think at least through halfway through the season, he was leading the nation in picks. Really, at his best, an exceptionally good pass defending safety, a good run stopper, but he's a little bit on the smaller side. So you typically don't love having him like up in the backfield a lot, making tons of hits. But like I said, at his best, a very good pass coverage safety. But there were times last year where teams picked on him a little bit, and he got burnt at times. And I think that's something that you can I think that's a lot of the things I saw last year that hurt him. I think are easily fixable on film and just on little technique things too. So I would expect Jeremiah Cooper to have a good season this year as well. So Jameson Patton, Jeremiah Cooper, I think are absolute lockdown guarantees to be two of your starting safeties. Now the third one is a little bit more up in the air. There's some guys on here for sure that are interesting. Um, but it's not quite as set in stone, I don't think. Trey Bell he's a transfer in. I think he's got a shot at it. Drew Surges was injured for a good chunk of last season, but we saw him play a bunch as a freshman. Um, that's certainly a name I think could be in there. Um, I think my favorite for this group, though, the guy I would assume is kind of the clubhouse leader right now is Tashawn James. So Tashawn James had a little bit of an auspicious and a little bit of a precarious start, I should say, to his playing time last season. I would say his first like major snaps came in the Kansas game down in Kansas City at Arrowhead. And that game, he got picked on and picked on and picked on. He had a terrible game. He was consistently out of position. Guys were burning him deep. It was ugly. He had a very, very difficult game. It's not all his fault. Kansas is a Kansas. If there was ever a football team in an offense designed in a laboratory to beat Iowa State's defense, it is that. For whatever reason, in both basketball and football, there exists a team in the conference that appears to have been assembled and concocted in a way to specifically beat Iowa State. In football, it's Kansas. In basketball, it's BYU. And they've had trouble with Kansas the last couple of years. Kansas is also very, very experienced. Tons of veterans all over the football field. And, it's like I said, it wasn't all his fault, but he had a rough game against Kansas. It was bad. But they continue to play him because they just various injuries. Malik Verdon couldn't stay healthy. Bo Freeler was having some issues. Bo Freeler I think he started every single game, but I believe it was the Kansas game. He came out early, didn't play a lot of snaps there. So Tayshaun James got a lot of snaps there. Throughout the rest of the season, as Malik Verdon continued to be injured a bunch, Tayshaun played more and more, and he did absolutely improve as the season went on. Had some of his strongest games towards the end of the season, especially the Kansas State game. He played really well. And then despite the outcome of the Arizona State game in the Big 12 championship, despite that, Tayshaun James actually did play a really nice game in the Big 12 championship too. And I think, like I said, this guy that I think he was thrown into the fire maybe before he was a little bit ready because he just had to be because of injuries. But this is a guy that I think through the offseason, when he gets a chance to sit down and really look at tape, get his body in really good shape and continue to work on his technique, I think Tayshaun James is a guy that's going to really jump going into next season, going into his redshirt sophomore season. And that's part of it too, I think, is that it shouldn't be forgotten is he was a redshirt freshman last year. So very, very young guy. Just like most of the defense is very, very young. I mean, you can just look at this. Look at this defensive backs group. There's one senior. Jeremiah Cooper is the only senior in this entire position group room. And this is combined defensive backs. This is combined defensive backs, so it's safeties and corners. And you've got one lone senior in there. You've got a handful of juniors, but look at all those freshmen and look at all those sophomores. This is a very young group. Talented. I think it objectively talented. But this is a young group. And so you're looking at Jeremiah Cooper and Jameson Patton being the vocal leaders of this room because they have both played a ton of snaps and a ton of games and names. So I think there's plenty of talent here to be effective. Kajan Cummings Coleman, I think he'll line up at safety. I'm not sure where they're going to put him. Trey Bell will figure into the equation somewhere, whether it's at corner or safety. He'll figure into the equation somewhere. Lots of interesting names. Drew Surges will play. I don't know if he's the starter. It doesn't matter if he's the starter. I don't know. In football, especially in defense, doesn't matter a ton if you're starting. If you're largely splitting up snaps. Otherwise, I don't know. Interesting group at safety, I think, and Deion Broomfield has done an exceptional job since he's gotten here. This was his first coaching, like, as a true position coach, his first coaching gig. But Dion has done a great job with the safeties room so far in his few years well, actually just not just a few years. He's been, I would say, quite a while now, but he's done a very good job with the safeties, and I have full confidence in them getting this room together because, and I would say it's defense for anybody that's not like super nerdy about this stuff. I would say it plays a 3-3-5 stack defense, which yeah, you get three linemen, three linebackers, three safeties, and a couple corners on the outside. This defense is heavily reliant on having very good safety play because the running game is designed to plug up the middle of the defensive line. It plugs up the middle of the line, and then you create this kind of this chaos right at the line of scrimmage, the safeties come down from the top and they fill in on the outsides on the perimeters. So when it's doing what it's supposed to, the defense clogs up the line of scrimmages, forces runs outside where the safeties then clean it up. That's why when you look at stat sheets for Iowa State, the leaders in tackles are almost always safeties. Not just because they're making tackles in the passing game, but because the safeties are coming up in the running game. If you look at last year, you look at that right there. Who's at the top? Bo Freeler and Malik Verdon. Right there. Two safeties leading the team in tackles. And Malik didn't even play 2 games. So you've got Malik Verdon, you got 2 safeties there, and you got another safety right there. 3 out of 4 of your leading tacklers are safeties. The room is nothing short of critical to this defense. Tayshaun James is right there as well. Got 2 entries on here for some reason, but Tayshaun James is right up there as well. Played every game, made some tackles. The room is critical to making Iowa State's defense work, and I think they've got the talent there. But you're working in some new starters. You're working in, frankly, you're working in a bunch of newcomers into the depth chart as well. So it's the problem that you're going to have every year is that you're just going to lose guys. Just Iowa State in the last 4 or 5 years, I think it's partially due to COVID and partially due to just a buildup of talent. Is that Iowa State tends to lose stars in waves. So, like, if you remember, like in 2018, you lose David Montgomery and Hakeem Butler and Brian Peavy. And then a couple years, you really don't lose a lot. And then after 2021, you lose Brock Purdy and Breece Hall and a number of other guys too. You lose, especially those who Charlie Kohler, Mike Rose. You lose a number of guys in 2021, and then now you lose a few different guys. Here you lose Bo Freeler and Malik Verdon, and so I would say has been typically loses stars in waves. They'll keep a core group of guys together for a long time. They kind of become stars throughout that whole process, and then eventually you just kind of lose them all at the same time. And that's kind of what happened with the safeties room. But because you play so many guys and have had to play so many guys, Jamison Patton has been rock solid his whole career. Jeremiah Cooper has been very good. So those are guys you feel very comfortable about. And if you have those 2 guys that are doing their job and the linebackers are doing their job, then that third safety spot becomes a little bit less critical because it's a lot easier to cover that stuff up with other guys if everybody else is where they're supposed to be. So safeties room is definitely promising, no doubt about it.